The startups now must start to look at investing and creating products. The services business is getting over. That era is gone. Quantum, semiconductors, and AI are three legs of a stool. All these three legs, we have to make them damn strong. If we can make them strong, then we would have some kind of tech sovereignty coming in. We also need to create our own LLMs. We also need to work towards making our own GPUs. These are all newer challenges that we must face and work on. Because unless we create our own GPUs and unless we create our own LLMs, how will we have tech sovereignty? We will always be dependent on the NVIDIAs of the world. We will always be dependent on the OpenAIs of this world. A GPU costs 15,000 and the GPU eats up a lot of power. 1200 watts for that chip, 300 watts for a $500 chip. We must now work on doing some research on this to make LLMs run on CPUs. So this is the kind of thinking we need to do in this country.
Thank you for joining the Ones Changing the World, India's first Future Tech Meets Sustainability podcast. I'm your host, Eddie Avi, and today I'm delighted and honored to have with me Dr. Ajai Chowdhry, who is a pioneering Indian entrepreneur and electronics industry leader who co-founded HCL in 1976, growing it into a $50 billion company. He led HCL Infosystems to become a rupees 12,000 crore leader in hardware and mobile telephony. Dr. Ajai chaired a 2009 Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology Task Force and now leads the National Quantum Mission. He is a distinguished fellow at NITI Aayog. Dr. Ajai has received numerous awards for his contributions to IT and electronics and was honored with the Padma Bhushan in 2011. He has shaped institutions like IIT Hyderabad and IIIT-Naya Raipur and transformed NIFFT Ranchi into a hub for advanced manufacturing. Through his charitable trust Swayam, he supports education and women's empowerment, notably via the Aspire Scholarship. He is a startup mentor and investor in over 50 ventures and has co-founded Epic Foundation to boost India's electronic self-sufficiency. He is known as the father of Indian hardware and holds a degree from Jabalpur Engineering College and a honorary doctorate from multiple institutions. His memoir, Just Aspire, reflects his journey in technology and entrepreneurship. So, Doctor, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. Wanted to start with your background, because you've got humble roots, refugee roots, in the partition era, to, your dream of using the microprocessor to change the world in 1976, which sparked HCL's journey. So, it will be great if you could start about that journey. And also, what parallels do you see in today's AI and quantum world?
I started from a small town called Jabalpur and did my schooling and college there. I studied at the Jabalpur Engineering College and I did electronics and telecommunication. Since my father was in the IAS, we moved around small locations all over Madhya Pradesh and then finally settled down in Jabalpur. And I had actually studied in Hindi medium till then. I had to quickly switch to English medium because I was going to join the Christchurch school. And my father got me a teacher, and in 3 months I was ready to go in English. So that's how my life started. And after that, after having done my schooling there, part of the schooling, I joined Jabalpur Engineering College and I did my electronics and telecommunication engineering. Now, during that whole period, I was quite influenced by my brother. And he always used to say that the future is in knowing more about sales and marketing. So I read a lot of marketing books. And so when I finished my engineering, unlike all other co-students of mine who went to work for Department of Telecom and government jobs, those days jobs were very scarce. So I applied for only sales and marketing jobs. And it took me about 6 months to, suddenly one day I got 3 invites for interviews in Delhi. And I came to Delhi and I stayed with my sister and appeared for all the 3 interviews and I got all the 3 jobs. So I then, of course, the challenge was which job to choose. And that's where my life took the right turn, I think. And I decided to join DCM Data Products, which was in the electronics business, making calculators. And therefore, because since I came from an electronics background, I felt that was the right thing to do. And I started on a princely salary of 600 rupees and living in Bombay I was posted to Bombay. Living in 600 rupees was quite a challenge, but I somehow managed to, get through that. And 3 years into DCM, that was 1975, when my co-founders uh, and us decided to leave DCM and start a computer company. That time, the microprocessor was just making its appearance. So we felt that if we took the microprocessor, we could literally change the world. And at that time, there were just 100 computers in the country. So we felt that the market would be phenomenal if we actually could make our own computer in India. And that was not a small task, because those days there was nothing called VCs or angels. And you didn't get funding. So we all started with just 1.86 lakhs. And we needed a license to make computers those days. And since the licensing was very tough, it was only given to large companies or public sector companies. The Department of Electronics just threw us out of the door and said, we can't give you a license. So, we started a little marketing company and started marketing calculators to create the cash flow. And in the meantime, we kept thinking about how to get a license. And suddenly we spotted UP government sitting with a license. So we went to them and said, why can't we join hands? And we have the experience of doing this in DCM. Why don't we just work together? So they agreed to doing that. And that's how we formed a joint sector undertaking with the UP government. And we called it Hindustan Computers Limited. And we were very particular that we must have India in our name. So it was a tough call at that time to get Hindustan, because the Hindustan was only given to, large companies or public sector. We somehow fought our way through and got Hindustan name. And that really helped us to position brilliantly, because when our salespeople used to walk into a customer premises, the name Hindustan made us look much larger than life. So that's how our, story started in HCL. So 6 of us started HCL with 1.86 lakhs.
Right. Doctor, yes, I think, what I take from your startings is, creating innovation frugally, building partnerships, and making sure that you innovate in all situations. And, from humble beginnings to, becoming one of the largest hardware company in India. But things have not changed. You mentioned about the challenges of, building a hardware company. I think that stays true even today. So I personally also have been invested in content largely, but in the AR, VR, MR space, the metaverse space. In early 2016, we were the first companies that kind of got into thinking that, okay, if you're building content, why don't we innovate over here and build hardware also? And we built out our own 16 camera virtual reality rig. But then we realized then that, again, there was no support whatsoever. There was like no ecosystem and nobody, because I think, when you are in a tech space, which is like, has like a longer horizon, then no VCs want to even kind of touch you. So I think, the world, I think, knows that, globally we are software leaders, but hardware, we still are lagging. And you are one of the pioneers and the leaders in the space. What are you doing to make a change in creating a hardware ecosystem here in India?
So, for many, many years, I sort of advised the government in electronics policy. And I've been part of literally every committee that the government set up for the last 30 years. And last one that we did was to write the electronics policy for the country. From the beginning, I have been telling the government that, we can't just be in software. Software and hardware are two sides of the same coin. So if we just look at only software, then we are not good and successful. Fortunately, even HCL got into software and became a huge success. But look at what's happening now. If we look at the situation that is facing us today, it's very clear that we need to be both in hardware and software. And there are a lot of headwinds to software now due to AI and automation. Therefore, as a country, we must move towards being a product nation. So, after my stint at HCL and having taken HCL to where it was, I started to work on many areas, and one of them was startups. The other area was to, again, look at hardware. And 3 years ago, me and my co-founder, Arjun Malhotra, we set up a foundation called EPIC. EPIC stands for Electronic Product Innovation Consortium. So with EPIC, our whole objective is to, again, recreate the electronics industry in India, which got destroyed in 1995 when WTO kicked in and made the duty zero in the country for imports. So what our dream is at this stage is to make India a hardware product nation. So to do that, we are working with many parts of the government, like we work with consumer affairs in the country to make India having its own policy for right to repair. And with the Ministry of Electronics and the Ministry of Commerce, we work on startups in hardware and electronics. And thirdly, we help create policy for the country. So as a matter of fact, last year, in the beginning of last year, I met the minister and I said, look, we've already set up semiconductor plants. They're going to come up in the next 3 years. When the plants come up, who will be the customer of the fabs? It's a bit of a cart before the horse situation. We will have fabs, but there'll be no domestic customers. So unless we make India a product nation in both systems and chips, we cannot achieve that. So we actually, through help of MEITY, we created a task force, which was led by the principal scientific advisor, Professor Sood. And we had 10 people from the industry. And we wrote a task force report where we recommended very strongly that for fabs to be successful, we must have a systems plan and a chip plan. The challenge at this moment is that all plans that the government has for developing semiconductor chips or designing chips in India, they're bottom up. Bottom up means that a startup comes, gives you a plan and says, I want to make this chip. You fund it, but they have no market. So there's no sense in supporting something like this. So we said, let's come top down. So what we did is that through EPIC, we did a lot of research to find out what is the market for chips in the country. Which are the top 30 chips that India needs for its own requirements. And then we made a list of these 30 chips. And we also made a list of 30 products that India must make. And a clear recommendation to the government is to fund the development of these products and chips in India. And we've given a recommendation about 35,000 crores. Because we said that your 75,000 crores that you've spent on semiconductors and another 75,000 crores that you're going to spend tomorrow will go waste. Because unless you have customers in India, who will buy chips from you? And you'll be totally dependent on export business. Now, who in the world will buy from a new country like India who has just started making chips? So we felt that if India specifically goes after these list of 30 chips and these 30 products, we would create enough domestic market to fill the fabs. So that is the whole objective of my foundation, and we are very strongly pushing that. I write a lot of articles in newspapers. I do a lot of interviews in the press.
That's the correct approach. So, Doctor, two things. Would want you to clarify, like what specific 30 chips that you're talking about and what products, 30 products that you're talking about. Will be great if you could answer that. That's my first question. And second, do you think that we are lacking a nurturing ecosystem when it comes to pushing those dreamers or scientists or researchers who are going really brave? Like, for example, I think two of the biggest companies in the world at this point in time one is OpenAI and second is DeepMind with Google, who are building the AI and AGI. They had a dream. And they had no product in mind whatsoever. They just had a vision that they're going after, like the moonshot. The moonshot was building artificial general intelligence, and at that point in time, nobody wanted to support them, But then I think being in America, there were some investors, they supported them. But in India, we lack that ecosystem. Look at them right now. They are the largest company in the world. Both OpenAI and DeepMind. Somehow I see from my perspective that we are not breeding or we are not nurturing those dreamers who go after this moonshot, because I think, we're going after products. I think we need to go behind these visions, which are like really brave. When you go after like artificial general intelligence, I think everything falls in place. Everything then kind of falls in place. So two questions. One is if you can elaborate on the 30 chips and the 30 products that you're talking about. And second question is, do we lack the nurturing ecosystem that's needed here in India, when it says that, okay, we're going to support our deep tech entrepreneurs or researchers and scientists, we're going to give them funds and we're going to give them everything that they need to build.
So, these 30 chips and 30 products that we have, I'll just read out some of the names that are there for these chips. For example, we are saying that we should make, these are all the products that I'm talking about. These are the chips that I'm talking about. So if I look at chips, we're talking about a mobile SoC. We're talking about a wearable SoC. We are talking about tiny microcontrollers. We are talking about server processors. We are talking about AI accelerator chips. We are talking about Wi-Fi chips, NFC chips, etc., etc. So close to 30 chips of this kind, which we believe are required for the Indian market. And then in the list of products, we have basically, we must design our own smartphone. We can't just be sitting and importing everything. Hearables and wearables, gaming toys. Then we should look at designing our own tablets and servers. We should have our own power electronic products and so on. So I think this is the way we have sort of recommended to the government, because unless we create a product nation, we are going to be constantly in a situation of having to import everything. See, today China is the world's product nation. India is the world's services nation. We are 60% services and 40% products and commodities. China is 90% products and commodities and 10% services. So their focus on products has been very successful. And therefore, they are very deep into not just creating today's products, but also creating tomorrow's technologies and tomorrow's products. And unless you create today's products, you're not going to do the tomorrow's products. We don't have that experience in this country. So about 2 years ago, few of us got together and we said, let us look at what India should be in the next 20 years. And we then looked at a parallel of what happened in the US. US just post World War II had a scientist called Vannevar Bush. And this chief scientist of the United States at Vannevar Bush, he actually wrote a manifesto for the US. And he said, this is the way US can lead the world. And what did he say? He basically said, if we do R&D investment into technologies and science, that's how we will succeed. So when he wrote that manifesto, DARPA got created, NSF got created, NASA got created, whole bunch of these organizations got created. And then parallel to that, they also made tuition free for global students coming to top universities like Stanford. And they said, if you can retain these students in the US, you will have the manpower to do this. So, parallel, all of these things created the Silicon Valley. So we said, why can't we look at a parallel to this in India? And we started to study the whole software and services area. And we said, there's going to be serious headwinds to services now. We have been totally dependent on services. This is not the right thing for us. So we said we should create a product nation. And this product nation has to be around R&D. R&D has to be the center of it all. So we brought in a group of economists, researchers, industry people. We sort of spent a lot of time and then we sort of socialized it with the government. We've already had 3 offsites with this, where all of us have spent time on writing this whole plan up. And we then presented it to the government. And the government officers have been very, very supportive. And as a matter of fact, last year in the budget, the government put aside 1 lakh crore fund to be put into R&D in private sector and startups. So this thinking is a long-term thinking. It is not just that you can do anything overnight. R&D in India by private sector is extremely poor. So the way we have suggested is that kickstart that by bringing corporates and SMEs and startups, fund them with specific areas. So we identified 12 areas where we must have our own technology. See, in this whole unipolar world that we are living in today, after Trump started doing all kinds of stuff, we need to have tech sovereignty. And this tech sovereignty is going to come from having our own technologies in different areas.
Kudos to you and your effort. And yes, I think even if you kind of emulate what these people have done, and kind of bring it over here, like, what the effort that you're doing, I think everything will kind of upend, because then things will change. Because like you mentioned in the course of the conversation, right now we are not a product nation, and we're just importing everything, and we're depending on other nations, and there will be a time, maybe there might be blocks, and which is already being seen. I mean, the US, the government's AI policy, they created this policy called AI diffusion and export control policy, where they have divided the world in three different parts. There's one chunk, one allies, where we will get the chips for AI chips. The second country, which India also falls in, will have chips, but not the open weight data and stuff like that. And third is like the Russias and Chinas and Irans and the other North Koreas, which will be completely not be given any kind of access. So there is this US government which is trying to act like an overlord when this tech should be global. So how is India prepared or to face this challenge of sorts? Because I mean, we know that AI is the biggest tech at this point in time. It's GPU hungry. It needs GPUs. It needs these AI chips. And currently, definitely, like you mentioned, we lack these things. So how is this AI, US government's AI diffusion and export policy going to impact us? And what's the AI plan for India?
See, this is the reason why we did all this exercise of working on a product nation. And inside that product nation are sitting technologies like AI, semiconductor and electronics, drones, space tech, nuclear, and a bunch of others, close to 12 technologies. And our objective is that these 12 technologies, we should invest into R&D, into private sector, with an organization led by the private sector. See, this 1 lakh crore organization is going to sit next to the ANRF, which is the organization that the government has set up to run R&D into scientific areas. This particular ANRF has been given 50,000 crores. This new organization, which is going to get 1 lakh crore, is going to sit next to it. So what our objective is that ANRF will do TRL 1 to TRL 4 or 5. And this new organization will do TRL 5 to TRL 9. So technology readiness level is going to be the basis on which money will be spent. So the whole idea is that let's let research not just sit inside labs. Research must come out and create products. Research must come out and not just write papers. Research must come out and create products. So that's the whole thinking that we have sort of been coming up with. 10 days ago, the Prime Minister had a webinar on this where he talked about all these areas, and he also talked about this R&D into private sector. Post that seminar, there was a very deep discussion among 25-30 people whom Department of Science and Technology had invited. And we actually gave the prescription on how this 1 lakh crore should be used. Although a presentation was made by the DST secretary on how it will be done, but 25 of us were asked, each of us were asked questions on what should we do, how should we do, what should be the directions we should take, and how much of the startup funding is required, what kind of startup funding is required, and where should we put this money. All this has been already discussed. This is now coming into a paper, and this paper will then go to the cabinet for approval, which will then help create this new organization. This new organization, our suggestion has been that it should be led by private sector with government people present in it, but they should not have any governmental type of thinking there. We should not have GFR rules, for example. Government buying rules. Government buying rules will not be followed, right? Number two, the R&D must be made simple. Today, process of R&D is quite complex in this country. We must work on that. So these are some of the things that will happen. And I think with that, we are creating an environment. See, today, environment is lacking. So with this, we'll create an environment where we hope to invite global Indians to come back to India.
Right. Creating environment, Doctor. I think that's so very important. I'm just going to kind of push back on the point you meant about, the US scientist Bush, who kind of created this manifesto about creating an ecosystem, free tuitions for foreign students, and like creating an open and welcoming ecosystem, which is so very important to, get in more manpower, and get in more collaboration also. I was just interviewing Professor Barry Sanders. He happens to be a quantum computing researcher and scientist, and he heads the Calgary's Quantum City. And he was mentioning that he was here in India to kind of, collaborate with India and share his insights and foresight about quantum computing with IIT Madras and Vajra University. But there was a whole lot of problems, for him to come here over here as a visiting professor. And largely, I'm assuming it's because of the geopolitical issues, wherein China, creates this very open ecosystem. They have something called as R visa, and they welcome like foreign professors, to come in, because it helps the country. Should geopolitical issues be mixed up with technology and collaboration, which kind of actually helps and benefits our nation?
You see, I have a slightly different view on this. Post-Trump, my view is that we are on our own. Okay, we are not going to be able to get technologies when we need them. We must create our own. There is no option. We must have tech sovereignty as our main thinking. This old concept of Atmanirbharta has no meaning anymore. Atmanirbharta does not mean that we own anything. Atmanirbharta means we make something. We make everything. Just making is not good enough. It's all about designing and making, and also creating technology. So I gave it a much broader perspective, and I call it tech sovereignty. For tech sovereignty, we have to work with countries who will work with us. Now, if you look at the US today, they can stop anybody traveling to India, or they can stop the technology moving to India anytime. So should we work with the US? Yes, we should talk to them, learn from them, no harm. We can even collaborate with them in some areas. But to think that they will help create IP in India together with them is far-fetched. Same thing with China, of course, nothing will happen, right? So Russia, obviously, nothing much will happen. So what are we left with? We are left with Europe. So Europe has a lot of requirement for Indians. Reason is that Europe doesn't have enough people who are scientists and researchers. They don't have enough. So our thinking is that maybe we should work with some smaller countries in Europe who actually have great technologies. And if we can do some joint IP work in India, that will make a lot of sense. For example, let's say Finland had some great quantum technology. They have created a quantum chip. Why can't we work with Finland and now take that chip forward to make larger quantum computers, where we can jointly own IP? We can put 500 scientists into it in India. They don't have 500 scientists. So the benefit of their experience and technology and our capability and skills, we combine together to create joint IPs. That's really
and Iran's
on the national quantum.
So, Doctor, talking about the quantum computing, I believe that quantum computing is one of the most powerful technology, because that's where we are going to move from zeros and ones, binaries, to qubits, where we will be kind of creating compute where we are using qubits, which is atoms, atoms, the source code of life, and I think the road, if we get onto that road, is going to be, I think, that might completely change the world or the entire history of human race altogether, because I think AI, the tech is powerful, but I think quantum computing is the next tech stack, You are the National Quantum Mission leader. What was the nudge, because you have like a very traditional background in the hardware space. What kind of nudged you to lead or take on the role of the National Quantum Mission, lead the National Quantum Mission? And maybe it will be great if you could highlight your views on how do you think that India as a country can take lead, because we're still way behind, because there are countries like America, Canada, China, and many others who are leading in the space. What's your plan in taking India ahead with the quantum computing space?
You see, it was not my decision. The government decided to choose me as the chairman of the National Quantum Mission, and I think they clearly told me that they were looking for somebody who understood both hardware and software, and they did not find too many people like that in the country, because most people have software experience and hardly anybody has hardware experience, as you rightly know. Now, when we started out the National Quantum Mission, there was a proposal given to the government and a cabinet note was created based on which the quantum mission was sanctioned in 2020. And the whole thinking was that 4,000 crores will go into Department of Science and Technology to set up the National Quantum Mission. And another 2,000 crores will be spent by Department of Space, Department of Atomic Energy and Department of Defense. So total of 6,000 crores would be put behind this important mission. Government very clearly and strongly felt that quantum is something we should not stay behind. All right. So as a result of that, 4 areas were identified. 1, compute. The 2nd, sensing. The 3rd, communication. And 4th, materials. And monies have been put aside for each of these 4 areas. 4 hubs have been set up in the country. All these 4 hubs are Section 8 companies so that they don't get, into a situation of government type of thinking. They should be independent. So these Section 8 companies have already come up. All these 4 Section 8 companies will have hubs and spokes. And there are 81 institutions all over the country who are involved with the National Quantum Mission and going after the mission's objectives. The mission's objectives this time are not around just research for the heck of doing research, but research for creating products. And that's really why I also felt very comfortable coming here, because I felt that it goes with my thinking of creating a product nation. And so we now have a target for 8 years for each of these areas, right? We need to create 1,000 qubit computer. We need to create 2,500 kilometers of space and ground communication, etc. Now, each of these targets have now been passed on in a 6 monthly slab to each of the researchers all over the country. And our objective would be that every 6 months, we will review their progress and to make sure they're on the right track. Okay. And we are creating the boards in all these 4 institutes to have people from industry also. Okay. So that's the initial thought process, and that's how we have actually now started giving out funds. And the initial funds have all gone to these Section 8 companies. Now, the situation is that in communication, India is doing very well. In compute, we are far behind. In sensing, we are doing very well. Materials, we still have a lot to do. So this is the situation on the ground as of today. Good news is that as far as communication is concerned, already a lot of startups are there, and there are a couple of startups who are global. They even have offices in the US, and they've created some outstanding products which are for securing the nation. And one of the things that we are now doing is writing a policy document to say how do we become quantum secure, so that tomorrow if China comes up with a quantum computer and it breaks all our cyber security, we'll be dead. So we are actually writing this paper, and we'll publish this paper in the next few months, where we will have a task force that will go after getting it implemented. So we will review what's happening in the financial sector, we will review what's happening in the electrical grids, etc., which are all under threat if a quantum computer is powerful enough to, crack it. At this moment, that time has not come. It will be another 5 to 10 years, who knows when, right? Everybody, there's so much hype that happens in any of these industries. Microsoft will come up and there's some hype about Microsoft, and then Google and then D-Wave. It confuses the hell out of everybody. The reality is different. Reality is that a real powerful quantum computer is still 5 to 10 years away. If you look at the real powerful computer that can attack cybersecurity, maybe 7 years to 10 years. But as a country, we must make ourselves quantum secure. So since we already have products created in India in this area by startups, we are recommending to different departments of the government to start using these. All right. We are also working on creating standards and a standards body and a testing body. So if the government wants to buy a product, the government lab would have certified that this product. So these are the kind of things that we are doing on one hand. The other leg that we are following is to create more and more startups in this area. We very strongly believe that startups will take us faster to our goal, and therefore we must invest in startups. So unlike any other government agency, we have been very, very generous in giving funding for startups. So we give funding from 0 to 30 crores per startup, and in special cases up to 50 crores. Okay, now our startup scheme also doesn't tell somebody you bequeath your house and then we'll give you money. None of that nonsense. Here we have a much more intelligent way of handling it. we get them to sign a CCPS. And when you go for a listing, you give us 30% discount, and the government has the option to take the stock at that time. So that becomes the security for the government for giving the 30 crores or 50 crores. That the finance department in DST was solid enough to accept it. And this is the first time it's happened in this country that we are already giving this kind of money. Already 8 startups have been given away 70. It's not happening in any other department. So this is the kind of way we are approaching it. We are also involving software companies. We are involving corporates right at this moment. We have also now given out a RFP for writing algorithms in the country. So that also will be a major initiative. I think we are still long way from where we should be, but I think we made a reasonably good start. The challenge that we are facing in the National Quantum Mission, and this is something that really keeps us awake at night, is the fact that the space at which this technology is growing, our targets are not good enough. So we are now discussing internally what should we do. And this meeting is actually scheduled end of this month when 4 or 5 of us are going to sit down and relook at the targets.
So, you rightfully pointed out quantum computing. Practical, working, fault-tolerant quantum computers are at least 8 or 10 years away, or maybe possibly beyond. But I think, once we get to these fault-tolerant quantum computing, they will be completely game changers. And you rightfully pointed out, I think, what we need to do is create a supportive ecosystem, get startups, push them, and support them. And I think, we will have like a robust ecosystem. I had the opportunity of speaking to Dr. Vijay Raghavan, who leads TIFR, and this was back in 2019. At that point of time, they were just building over 3 qubit quantum computer. And right now in 2024, announced the partnership with DRDO that we're getting to 8 qubit quantum computer. Now you have
well, you'll be surprised 20. That the startup in Bangalore already has a 25 qubit computer. So, and that guy has taken a target to take it to 50 this year, and he will make it 100 next year. So, that's why I said we will not just depend on research labs alone. We will challenge the research labs through startups also.
Exactly. I think competition is the best thing. You put the startups, the bright minds from the startups, as well as the researchers, let them, compete. And that's when I think, what you spoke about, we'll get into a product nation and build out these completely.
The ecosystem starts to get created, The ecosystem is very... See, the T-hubs will provide all the mentoring, all the equipment that a startup needs. So startup doesn't have to invest in equipment. Startup doesn't have to invest in software. They can come to the T-hub, use the equipment, use the software, get the mentoring of the professors. That is the ecosystem that I'm talking
Doctor,
about.
I think in India, we have the largest bunch of quantum developers here in the country. And I think that's really, really, really cool. You spoke about, your quantum applications, across maybe quantum cryptography, quantum sensing, metrology, and things like that. What are the low hanging fruits at this point in time, that, India, we going after for, quantum applications, quantum products that you're speaking about?
Already we are talking to pharma companies and some others to look at some of the applications, like, for example, drug discovery. So those kind of things, we are already talking to some of them. We are also talking about how to use a mix of quantum and AI to reduce the time for clinical trials. So some of these could be real breakthroughs, So, but these are still to happen, but these are what our dreams are. I think very importantly, we want to do more and more in this area. For the first time, I'm working in some manner within the government and outside the government. Although I'm not part of the government, I'm chairing this mission. But I tend to go few layers lower. So I meet the researchers. I just visited the sensing lab in IIT Bombay, and I could see the kind of great work that they're doing. And I have a lot of belief that they will create terrific products from there, because their magnetometer is nearly there. So I saw the first proto of the magnetometer, and they're actually trying to make sure that a lot of the electronics can be put inside a chip.
So they could reduce the size and it could be a handheld magnetometer. So, these kind of things are something that our researchers are already thinking about. Like, for example, one of the concerns that I have in semiconductors, for example, is that we are importing a lot of chips from China. Now, recently, there were a lot of research done on a specific Bluetooth chip and a specific networking chip, which was all found to have trapdoors. Proven. Now, we have millions of these installed in. Okay, this is not a good situation to be in. So, when I was talking to the researchers in the sensing lab, they said they can actually help in identifying chips that have backdoors using quantum sensing. So, these are all the practical applications of quantum. And my view on, I'll switch tracks now to semiconductors because that's another area of great interest to me. Quantum, semiconductors, and AI are three legs of a stool. All the three legs, we have to make them damn strong. If we can make them strong, then we would have some kind of tech sovereignty coming in. Okay? So semiconductors, my view is that we've done good work in creating fabs in India, but we have done a very poor job of not creating products and chips made in India, as I told you earlier. So that's something that I'm pushing like hell with the government to say, invest in that. But the third piece is AI. And you were really very, very keen on making AI happen in this country. Now, there are so many challenges to make AI happen in this country. One, as you rightly said, the US has, sort of put an embargo on certain GPUs, etc. But we have enough GPUs that the government has bought for giving it to startups to use. And they are giving it at a very reasonable price. So that's a great start that they are making. But we also need to create our own LLMs. We also need to work towards making our own GPUs. These are all newer challenges that we must face and work on. Because unless we create our own GPUs and unless we create our own LLMs, how will we have tech sovereignty? We will always be dependent on the NVIDIAs of the world. We will always be dependent on the OpenAIs of this world. So one interesting thing China has done is made it open source. Today it's open source. Tomorrow they'll start charging for it. Who knows? So we have to now invest in the third leg, which is AI. AI, I think we need to work on 2-3 very important areas. One is that we should use semiconductor and AI to create certain types of AI accelerators. Okay, like for example, there's a fantastic company in America that has created AI accelerators. What that does is that dramatically improves the speed of running a model. Okay, and they claim that they can run 10x faster than a GPU. So, these are all interesting opportunities for us to work. We need to be on our own in some of these areas. We also need to work on strategies to make LLMs work on, and this is my dream, I don't know whether it will happen or not, but we must make LLMs work on CPUs. Why? Because GPUs are so constricting for the whole developer environment. There are millions of developers all over the world. Everyone is not going to have it. A CPU, high-end CPU from Intel costs $500, $600. A GPU costs $15,000. And the GPU eats up a lot of power. 1200 watts for that chip, 300 watts for a $500 chip. We must now work on doing some research on this to make LLMs run on CPUs. So this is the kind of thinking we need to do in this country.
What happens is the world is like a herd of sheeps. If people are going towards one direction, everybody is running over there. I just had a conversation with somebody who pioneers Neuro AI. A brain works with just 20 watts of power. It's not data hungry like these LLMs. They don't need so much data. Exactly. And the brain works with 20 watts. So yes, these people are working on another approach. With instead of these LLMs with data hungry approach, they're going towards a neuro AI approach where they are reverse engineering these animals and kind of trying to build these autonomous general purpose agents. So yes, I think what we need to do is maybe possibly look at maybe new architectures, new ways of building these general purpose intelligent rather than just running behind foundation models. Quickly, if you can maybe speak about startups, because you mentioned that 50 startups you've actually mentored and kind of have invested in them. Are you still investing in startups, and what's the criteria? What do you look for in startups?
Actually, now that number has grown to 70 plus. So every month I invest in one or two, or sometimes one in 6 months, one in 2 months, one in 3 in 1 month, all that, depending on what I'm doing. So I am constantly investing in startups, and my whole objective is that I'm part of the Indian Angel Network, and therefore the network actually does all the scouting for startups. And once they bring these scouted startups into a presentation, I select a few, and in some of them I also mentor them. So I select a few where I invest more. Like typically in a startup, I may invest 5 to 10 lakhs, and I invest in all over the place. So my returns come through the ones that really make it. Some of them give me 40x, some give them 200x, some give me 0x. So it all depends on a multitude of startups that we invest. But now I'm starting to invest in some AI startups, and some of them are very, very interesting. And they are doing great new work in startups in AI. And I'm investing into space startups and all of these types of things. So the good part of India today is that there's just so much happening in startups, and so much excitement and so much momentum that is there in startups that it's very exciting.
Right. My last question to you. Will you be able to give a brief overview on your book, Just Aspire, and also maybe advice to students? And now I want to pack in one more question. So your book, Just Aspire, advice to students in startups, and will be great if you could paint the picture of India in the next 10 years. With your vision, being product leaders, where do you see India the next 10 years, and how will India and Indian society change with being, independent with tech, having our own hardware and software?
So basically, I wrote this book and I titled it Just Aspire because I was taught by Dr. C.K. Prahlad in Michigan. And one of the things he used to say is that he used to say is A is greater than R. If you have the aspiration, resources will happen. And that's the HCL story. We had 1.86 lakhs. Today we have 50 billion. So, that really tells you the story of aspiration. And that's why I titled the book Just Aspire. I felt that if we aspire, we can achieve anything. And therefore, that's what I tell all startups. If you have the aspiration, don't say, mere paas ye nahi hai, mere paas wo nahi hai. Everything will happen if you have the aspiration. The second thing that I tell a lot of startups is that you must pay attention to certain basics that you must learn. And that's why in that book, I have written a chapter on salesmanship. And I always tell the CEO of a startup that if you're not a great salesman, I'm sorry, you won't succeed. So I have a chapter on salesmanship. There's another chapter on people. People tree, I call it. How do you actually handle people, and how do you actually make people happen? I created a hardware business with not the brightest and the best in the world. I used to go and hire from tier 2 cities and tier 3 cities. Believe you me, they were delivering better results. Why? Because they were hungrier. And so therefore, selecting the right people, making them successful is important. And so selection of people is something I used to do on the basis of a McClellan theory, which said you select people who have the need for achievement. And that's really what I suggest to all my startups, that look at people who have need for achievement. And those are the ones that will take you forward. And lastly, as far as the country is concerned, I'm quite clear that the startups now must start to look at investing and creating products. The services business is getting over. That era is gone. Don't go and create another services company. Create a product company. Make a medtech product. Make a space tech product. Make a drone. Make a two-wheeler EV. There are so many opportunities in this country. We have a very large population. I mean, we have a huge domestic market to take advantage of. So therefore, that is what we should be doing today. And once we are able to create products in India, don't think only India, think global. Whatever product you create must have a global.
Appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. Yes, I think we are sitting at such a fantastic point of time. And India, holds the right, keys, the ingredients of sorts, because, demographic dividend, a software leader, with this convergence of tech of sorts with AI, XR, quantum computing, robotics, nanotech, and so on and so forth. I think we are at the right point of time, and wish you the very best. I love the book, by the way. I think it's very, very interesting. And to my listeners, I think you need to buy this. It's a beautiful book. Wish you the very best, and really, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Bye-bye. Thank you, doctor. Really appreciate this. Thank you.